Biohazard Bros Podcast.
Welcome back, fellow survivors, to a special bonus episode of the Biohazard Bros Podcast. I am Kenjira 80, one half of the Biohazard Bros. My colleague is off today, probably playing and streaming video games like always, but we have a very special guest today. Today we have a member of the Residents of Evil squad. Uh, she is also a screenwriter for the Resurrection, a Biohazard story that's coming up, among other projects, and a very, very special guest. And we're proud to talk to Adi Attavane, also known as Beggy Bag on the Residents of Evil. Welcome to the show, Beggy. Thanks for coming on.
Oh yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm going to be doing a few of these. So we had a podcast with Project Wesker about our project, and he had all sorts of good questions, and it was a great opportunity to kind of like let people know more about what angle we're taking with our project, and what they could expect. So yeah, I'm looking forward
Mm,
to it. Thank you.
absolutely. Like we're waiting with bated breath to see what you have written. You now you did the screenplay for the did you also do the screenplay help with the screenplay for the Keeper's Diary?
Keeper's Diary was pretty much all Andrew. All I did there, I wrote the post credit scene for the third energy crisis, and I did some editing and proofreading of Andrew's final script for the Keeper's Diary. But in terms of the actual conception of the narrative, and then translating all of that into visual elements, all of that was really Andrew. Andrew was almost like a solo, like it was like a one man job in terms of writing, and the direction really. So there, I kind of just filled in wherever I could to help, but really small work in terms of writing for me. This one was much, much larger. So,
Yeah. I it's funny because I had Greg Smith, he reached out to me a few weeks ago and came on the show, which super out of left field, and I'm like, wow. I mean, like we're just a startup podcast, you know what I mean? This is like we're 8 episodes in. He
mhm.
even sent me he sent a letter, and I keep it in the I don't want to it's got like goodies and stuff he sent me, signed goodies. I
Okay.
don't want to mess with it, but I keep it put up here. But he was telling me on the show that you sent him the script and this dog ate it,
Yeah.
and I lost my cookies on that one because I was like, wow, I find it ironic that you're a school teacher and you had your dog ate the homework.
Your homework.
But
Yes.
that was really
It
fun.
literally did. It was
Yeah.
bizarre for me to it's a little bit surreal for me to try to recall that because that version of the script was very different from what it is now. The core structure and the core elements, the core ideas were the same, but how it looked, how it read, the pacing, so much of that was actually changed from then. It's like we I know some people try to basically print out the physical copies of sprint of their scripts to like practice with.
Hmm.
But a lot of times, we adapt to any number of practicalities while filming. We always want to improve the story. We always want to improve the pacing. And so his dog must have eaten, I don't know, draft number like 6 or 7. And now we've had like 25 to 30, like around there. We've had so many. And so that wouldn't have even have really helped him if he held on to it. But it's a funny story for sure.
Yeah, I should imagine that when you're writing a script like um that it's kind of like it's ever evolving and changes are made, in the midst of it. I'm sort of a I'm an artist. I'm more like I do like I grew up with, like drawing, sketching, comic book art. I've transitioned into like doing amateur digital art. Never really tried to tackle writing, so that's hey man, kudos to you, man, to be able to actually come up with uh a script for Resident well, Biohazard, the Resurrection. We don't want to call it Resident Evil because we don't want Capcom making no claims. Um or getting you in trouble. But
Right.
yeah, just to be able to do that. So what I understand from some of the people in the community, you are quite the lore hound. You're an encyclopedia of Resident Evil knowledge, and so that really must play a big factor in the ability to be able to write something like this.
I wanted to talk about that for a second because in that
Absolutely.
campaign, there is a quote about me being, it's one of those like, oh, I'm so thankful moments, right? And I hope it doesn't come off super cliche, but it literally, I do feel exactly precisely that way, that like I could live multiple lifetimes if we're able to do that. We don't know. But if I were able to, I might not get lucky enough in any of them to have been able to get the opportunity to write something like this. So it's extremely fortunate. With the Lorehound thing, I think there are people that are much actually like legitimately, I believe this. I think there are people that are legitimately more learned and experienced and erudite with Resident Evil knowledge beyond myself. And I think that they would do just as well. I think in terms of actually transcribing those ideas and initial material into something new and novel, I think that's a different skill though. I think that actually involves a little bit of play into outside sources and seeing what we could use. So, for example, speaking of that, before writing this and kind of like during the process, I had been reading a couple of really fascinating books about trauma, and I had been reading a couple of fascinating books about um, how certain traumatic incidents leave their marks on the body and how that actually shows up in a biological sense. What kind of hormones are released? What are we playing with? So a lot
Hmm.
of what resurrection is actually centered around is the current sort of state of the body. What sort of I don't want to get into it too deep, but
Yes.
so for example, if you look at like Resident Evil Survivor, if you look at Resident Evil Revelations 2, those are two more entries that kind of play off of the stress response. So the release of norepinephrine and adrenaline and fear and measuring fear, and T phobos mutates in response to fear. So I found that really fascinating. And that was something I
Hmm.
kind of tied back to that book because I'm like, wow, there are entire circuits in the human brain and body that are, now usable in a story situation, based off of what these characters experience, and we could leverage that. So building off of those kind of ideas, the body and the nervous system during states of stress and fear versus the body and the nervous system in states of rest and a state that is more conducive to social attachment and building trust in
Hmm.
relationships. So all of those kind of themes I wanted to embed into this world. And then, kind of one other inspiration that I'll kind of say is that I was studying a lot with different conceptual models that kind of break down the relationship between the head, the heart, and the body, and all these different centers, right? The feeling center, the thinking center, all that kind of stuff. So I was looking into kind of like esoteric systems, and there I was like, this would be really cool if because every Resident Evil entry, every Biohazard story, I think a lot of its identity actually lies within the new bioagent. What is at play here? How is it different? Is it a new strain of the progenitor virus, or is it something that's parasitic? Is it something fungal? So we've seen so many different types of bioweapons. Now we wanted to play with something new that has some
Mm.
traditional items and some things that fans would like to see, and we know that they sort of respond well to, but also brings novelty in a sense of you have to think about it more. It's not doing exactly what you're thinking it's doing, and it doesn't operate in exactly the manner that you might anticipate. So all of that together, we wanted to sort of introduce a new bioagent. We gave a little bit of concept art on the crowdfunding campaign as to what the effects might look like. Now, that doesn't tell the whole story, but that gives you a little bit. But yeah, very long-winded answer, but that's kind of like
Hey,
how
that's
I,
fine.
yeah, because it's one thing to regularly consume and digest all of these different types of biohazard stories across the novels, the games, everything. The sort of the Japanese writers write their own novels, right, for
Yeah.
Resident Evil. So it's practically infinite the amount of stuff that's here. And I think there are folks that are actually versed in that like well beyond me. Like if you look at the Batman, for example, on the Resident Evil podcast, that guy he has chronicled like
Oh,
every single uh-huh
from the Resident Evil podcast.
Resident Evil podcast, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
He has
he's so
chronicled like every
wow.
single major incident, and he's been updating it, right? Like that is like a absolutely incredible feat. I think there are people
He-
that do that. I think with
He has like
screenwriting,
a compendium online. I tried to
yes,
read it. It's like 3,000 pages long.
it's
It's
very
huge.
comprehensive. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, he's very knowledgeable. I enjoy very much listening to him talk, you know.
Mhm. So
As I do you. I was very much mentally prepared though for your intellect because I was I was I was told by Greg that he'd shared a ride with you to Iron Mountain or something like that,
oh
and
yeah, we in
and he
April, yeah.
said not only are you knowledgeable in Resident Evil, but you're knowledgeable in a lot of other things. And he was like, she's just a very sweet lady to listen to talk. And I was like, oh, so I was prepared for it. I listened to you, from time to time. I drop into the Bro Network streams on Twitch whenever I can, because usually you're streaming when I'm at work, but I drop in there when I can, and I give you a listen. So I've heard you go on about like deep subjects other than Resident Evil, even on them streams. So
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's
I,
very awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's Resident Evil and Biohazard stories as a whole. I would love for people to find more depth than there initially seems to be, right?
Yes.
Because we with this opportunity with the Resurrection of Biohazard story, we could have played it extra safe, just put them in like a time where the T virus was a thing. Don't really mutate it much, don't deviate, just keep it exactly how people remember, you know? But with
Hmm.
screenwriting, you always want an element of novelty. You want to build powerful emotional moments using new elements that weren't existent prior. And that's something that we really wanted to set up for. And speaking of that, these characters are getting older. They are moving into a new phase of their journey. Chris, picking up off of the events later in the timeline, picking up off of little bits of Village, you could see we were inspired by that. And
Yeah.
then kind of tying that back to an earlier place in time where we still have rookies coming into this whole realm of counterterrorism and counteracting the bioterror. And it's like, well, Chris, you're not going to last forever. Who would you pass the torch down to? What would you tell them? What are you believing now? Are you just rife with this disillusionment and this distrust of your own people because of what's going on with the BSAA? Or is there something that you can sort of make amends for, and if you could mend those relationships, how would that play out? And who's gonna carry on that torch for you when you're gone?
Right.
So that's part of what we're exploring as well.
Right, since they kind of missed an opportunity in Resident Evil 6 for Piers to carry the torch. Not
A
I
little
don't know.
bit.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know how well received he is with the community, but he seems to be generally well received. And if you're like, oh well, it should have been Chris that died off, and we kept Piers, and he could
Mm,
have passed the torch. But hey, Capcom's infamous for not wanting to kill off their main characters. But not trying to like dig too deep into it because I know that there's not much you can talk about. So I'm
sure.
I'm trying to trying to keep it as irrelevant to the like plot devices or whatever. But
Uh-huh.
does this insist that you insisting that there's going to be new characters, original characters created that are going to be introduced by
Yes, there are.
yourself? Oh
Yes.
man, that's awesome, dude.
Yes.
I am
There
super
are.
excited now.
Uh-huh. There are a few original characters. Each of them serve very distinct purposes. If you see on the crowdfunding campaign, Joe White is live action this time around, and Pablo Kuntz is live action this time around. So they
Hmm.
each play their own characters. Those are both new, and then there are a couple of additional new ones as well. So that's another thing about this campaign too. What makes it so exciting is that like I can talk about everything that I can talk about right now, but there's more that we're not showing to you guys. There's like a lot planned in terms of like the amount of content, what's there, in terms of who's a character and who's like a new character, an original character. That's kind of like, yeah, you can kind of guess like who's new, because beyond the original characters, what roles are being filled, right? So, but yeah, there are a few of those. Mhm.
Right. That's kind of breaking news to me. And we don't have a very big audience just yet, but I'm sure those who listen will be excited to learn that.
Oh yeah.
Um, if you don't mind me asking, I just have to know, like, before we really dive into Resident Evil, uh, what's the Baggy Bag? How did you get that name?
So I have a very silly name. It's partially because I don't know, I've just always been I didn't understand. I wasn't able to actually assign language to what I have and what I do until just recently. So the last year I read this book called Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences by Howard Gardner. Is really fascinating. But anyway, there's a passage in it talking about idioglossa and idiolect, and that's when people create like new made up words, and they create their own language. They speak in their own patois, so to speak. And it's
Interesting.
often, yeah, it's like they only speak it like within a small group of people, and it's only known by like a few people, and they don't care. They just continue to do. Apparently, I do that, and I have that. Um, like some people create idiolects like that, and so this one started like Beggy, like it kind of started when I was like a really young kid, like a toddler, and I just kind of noticed that like I would like visit my family in India, and like there would be like other kids around, and they would be like babies, and I would just notice that like the grandmas and the mothers would always like do this to like the baby's cheeks. They would like pinch their cheeks, and so the verb to like beg or beggy someone means to like pinch their cheeks, basically. So that's where the word came
Oh,
from, and then just
okay.
tripled up is just like a sillier version of it. But yeah, that's where it first came from, and then it just kind of continued throughout my life. Um,
That's far more interesting than Kenjira. I um I used to have a different screen name that I went by a long time ago. It was based on well, Faux Hammer, which was based off of Glamdring, the Faux Hammer from Lord of the Rings, because
okay.
I love Lord of the Rings. Very good books. Obviously, you're a literary hound as well, so I sort of am too. I was just at the book club yesterday, as a matter of fact,
Uh-huh.
but that's a side story. Pick me up a new novel. I like fiction novels. I like mostly like Dan Brown and stuff like that.
Okay.
Um, anyway, I was like, well, people don't really get that. Either you know what that is or you don't. Excuse me. And my son, he was born in 2019, so I remember it from that. That I chose the name Kenjira, where I took a portmanteau of my name, which is Kenneth, and then my favorite movie monster of all time is Gojira or Godzilla. But I
Oh,
thought
okay.
I thought Kenzilla sounded silly, so I went with Kenjira.
Oh,
And
that's
then
cute. Yeah.
I googled the name a couple months after I invented it in 19, and what I thought, well, I thought I invented it in 2019. I googled the name to see if anybody else had it, and it turns out there's a freaking documentary called Kenjira about like some Pattaya people, or I don't know, like they're like Indian or some sort of like like area around that area, but the
Mhm.
documentary is called Kenjira, and I'm like, damn it, man, I thought I invented that, but I don't know what it means apparently. So I often would wonder, I hope people don't think maybe that name, whatever Kenjira means in that language, I hope they don't associate it with that, because it was totally a
Mhm.
portmanteau. Totally not as interesting as yours, though, how you came up with it.
Oh, I mean,
That,
that's more than I was thinking. When I see a name that sounds vaguely like yours with like the vowels and such, I just kind of associate it with like something Japanese or something anime. I don't
yeah.
like inherently associate like the Godzilla thing and Ken, but like that's like a cool like combination.
Yeah, I just was like, I gotta have something unique to me, and it just kind of stuck. Now everybody calls me Kenjira online. On my channel, my partner, he's never called me by my first name ever. Just it's always been Kenjira. But
Uh-huh.
anyway, we'll move on from that. That's very interesting. So I always ask my guests, and I'm going to ask you, why Resident Evil?
Um, I think pretty much for all of my life, I've always sort of veered towards very specific special interests. And so there was like an era where it was kind of like dinosaurs was like the thing. And then there was an era where it was like birds of prey, I was like really fascinated with. And
Hmm.
then it was like kind of like computery stuff and like computer parts and such. And then at a certain point, it started to like veer towards horror, and horror, as I've sort of described a couple times before, is like was like really difficult for me to actually want to give a chance when I was younger, because it was just very,
Scary.
yeah,
Yeah.
simply put. So it was just very difficult for me to like commit to anything. But I think that franchises like Onimusha, Devil May Cry, Resident Evil were all very good bridges to horror for people that didn't like horror.
Yeah.
And there were people, they were also sort of good avenues of like reaching some level of self belief in self sufficiency. Like, can I survive by myself? Can I like do good for myself even though there are frightening things lurking around the corner? I think that
Hmm.
like horror games and experiences can be very empowering in that regard of you have a chance now to sort of embody your fears in the way that the artist sort of chooses, and then sort of like sculpts into an entire game, an entire experience, and then you're able to combat them in the way that you choose. You can run away when you want. You can prepare as much as you can, and it kind of like it kind of sparks all of these like urges to like fight back against any apprehension or anxiety that you might feel. And I
Hmm.
think that's like there's a lot of metaphorical value there that kind of extends beyond the scope of the game. That's why I think a lot of people build an attachment to Resident Evil early on, is that it might be their first, or if it's not their first, it's at least one of their defining moments of, hey, I can be self-sufficient, I can fend for myself.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's
Absolutely.
kind of like a big part of it for me. And then there's just like so much in the universe to explore. It's like, because you were talking about like yeah, books and like literary hound, this kind of thing. But for me, it's like, I think I've always been this way, is that like I always find a narrow breadth of things. And then I explore them as deeply as I can, which is kind of similar to the narrow and deep sort of Japanese game design philosophy that's like
Mhm.
outlined in the Resident Evil 7 Biohazard
Yeah.
document file. They talk about that. So if you kind of apply that kind of thinking to my interests and like what I get interested in, it's usually like I kind of get really fascinated with something rather than like being like infatuated with one thing and then moving on. I kind of like stay in one realm for very, very long, like years at a time, and try to
Really.
like really analyze it and
I
just kind of,
feel like
yeah.
that's something that you and I might have kind of sort of in
Uh-huh.
common. I mean, it's like hearing you talk about that sort of like reminds me of me. Like, I mean, and it's plastered all over my room. I have more than one interest, and sometimes I'll get fascinated with them for a period of time where I'll focus on that, but like I'll always keep like sentiments of it to go back to whenever, whenever I'm feeling like I want to do that. Like, let's take for instance, I love horror and Resident Evil. I also love comic books like, Batman and stuff like that. I do love monster movies, Japanese monster movies in particular, like kaiju movies. Um, Football. I love American football is another thing that I really love. So I have a lot of interests. So, and I tend to focus on them things usually whenever it's the right time or whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know how to explain that. Some people are like, "Oh man, you jump from this or that," but it's like, no, I always remain consistent with what I love. You know what I'm saying? It's just that sometimes I'm more fascinated with this subject than this subject at the current time. It just depends on my mood or my what's going on in life, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, does that
exactly.
kind of sound similar to
It,
maybe what
it,
you?
it does for me. Yeah, there's various factors sort of urge me to buckle down and zero in on certain interests over other ones, depending
Yes.
on like just what I'm fascinated with, what I've been reading. Usually when there's like a strong like a constellation of ideas that go together that I could synthesize with one another, then I get the maximum enjoyment out of that, because then that usually allows me to do things like write an essay or like a screenplay or like something creative that kind of pulls them together. And that's what Resurrection is. It's kind of like finding different pieces of inspirations, and then seeing a through line through all of them, and then weaving a thread that is common that kind of unites them, and then builds them into something new that hadn't existed prior. So that's like usually that's where I think the most powerful sort of memories are built from my interests, is that when there's like a sort of synthesis or a realization or like an epiphany of kind of like, oh, this actually ties into that, and I didn't see it before. Now, if I were to like kind of retroactively apply it and see it that way, then how would Resident Evil change? How would it be changed how I see it, right?
Right.
So that all of that, I think Resident Evil is a great sort of um, it's a great sort of hub to unite other seemingly disparate ideas and bring them back home, and then sort of recontextualize them and see how this was explored in different entries. So
Yeah, it's funny that how the human memory works, that you mentioned that. My co-host always talks about how he has dog shit memory, and like I sometimes do too. And we'll be in the midst of like recording an episode about, like, all right, take for instance, we did our second episode naturally was about Resident Evil 2 and its remake. We kind of bleed them together. And then we couldn't remember hardly anything from the games in the moment because we're so excited, this is a new thing. And then after the fact, we're like, oh yeah, that's right, that's right. Memory is such a weird thing because if you try to think back whenever you were a child, or even in your teenage years or whatever, I'm not sure how. I'm pushing, 45, so I even think back to my 20s, and I'm like, I can't remember hardly nothing unless it was like associated with a traumatic event or something, like, or even like a very good event, maybe like a wedding or a birthday or something of that.
mhm.
So our memories are intrinsically tied
Yeah,
to emotion,
they are.
and that's crazy. You know what I
They
mean?
are.
They
Mhm.
are, and that's
That's
just a very
also
cool thing.
I was reading there's this other book, amazing book, but it's called the body the mind gut connection. The mind gut connection, and this doctor wrote it, and it kind of it sheds light on exactly what you're talking about, because the enteric nervous system, which runs from like esophagus to your bowels, there is like a second nervous system that kind of like it's like a theater. Like it's very theatrical, and there's like different plays and characters and moments. There's defining moments that play out in that ENT, that enteric nervous system, and they are stored as what's called like a gut based memory. And when something's a gut based memory, it's really strong. Like you'll probably never forget it because there was some awe, or there was some pain, or there was something so powerful and evocative that
Hmm.
it has registered not only in your brain but like in your core, like in your gut, like it's there. And the memories and the feelings and the chills that people get, those are
Hmm.
associated with the ENT, and those are actually associated with your ability to kind of recall a memory and then feel something related to it. And that's also like when you try to recall a memory, say of like RE2 remake, you might think of like the opening like cutscene with like the buildings and stuff, and you see like a little video clip playing in your head.
Yeah.
So some of those video clip memories are very, very strongly tied to sensations in the gut. And how you registered the first time is how you're going to recall them. And so that is actually like another layer of what you're describing, but it's so true that like the most powerfully like felt sense sort of memories are the ones that are gonna last the longest and feel the most potent. So
So that totally makes sense because, all right, so tying this into, excuse me, Resident Evil, um, this is why the game is so, it's an important aspect of my life, like probably maybe the most other than my children. Um, all right, so when I was first introduced to Resident Evil, I didn't know that it existed. I was 16 years old, so it was not long after it came out.
mhm.
Um, my I and my mother and my stepfather, we relocated to South Carolina, and I've told this story before, in the first podcast. And I'm a teenager, 16. I'm in a new place, in South Carolina. I'm from Ohio, and I don't know nobody, you know what I mean? And I have, and this is like it can be a exciting and a terrifying experience relocating at a young age. I got to make new friends. I'm going to have to start a new school. This is all terrifying, but yet exciting. And I had no friends down there because I didn't know anybody. Well, my mom and my stepdad we stayed with a friend to get our feet planted down there for the brief time I was there, and I remember he had a PlayStation, and I had never really owned one. I'd only play them at KB Toys whenever they were on display for the demos. And I really loved Tomb Raider and Twisted Metal, and I I was like, I want to play Tomb Raider, you know, and he's like, well, have you ever played Resident Evil? And I'm like, no, I never even heard of it. So he's like, you want to try it out? And I'm like, yeah. And he put that game in, man, and it really just, wow, you know, it really stuck with me. And it was from that opening scene. I didn't, and I had no idea what this game was about. He didn't show me the cover or nothing. It would have been the director's cut. And from the opening scene, like with Charlie Krasinski and all them in the field, you know, and the dogs, and like I was like, wow, this is incredible, you know what I'm saying? And then the zombie in the mansion, in the West Side Mansion, when he turned his, I was hooked from that moment. And that out of all the things I experienced when I moved down there for the brief time I was there, that's what I kept with me all these
Mhm.
for 29 years. So, you know, but anyway, that's how I was introduced to it, and it's tied to an emotional response of wanting to attach to something.
Yeah.
Now I had already been exposed to horror as a young child. My cousin, who was a big horror nut, would put on movies like Night of the Living Dead was one of the first ones I ever saw, and I was terrified of it at like 6 years old, but I absolutely loved it. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that kind of fostered all that. And so being introduced to Resident Evil tied with that emotion of needing something to latch to because not having any friends, Resident Evil became my friend. Even so
Yeah.
much so that them games have gotten me through breakups. They've gotten me through like, you know, like hard times in life, and it's always just been my go-to. So that's kind of my story of how why Resident Evil for me. And
Mhm.
it's very interesting that it's kind of similar to you, you know. That's super awesome to me.
Yeah, I definitely relate to the aspect of these games being a sort of playground for you to hone your skills and like kind of stand your own ground when you're not really able to play the game in some aspect of your life. Like you lost the ability to play some other game or actually participate in some other domain because, yeah, you know, it might be a relationship, it might be loss, it might be the loss of an old home. It could be moving. It could be any number of those things, but it's like it puts you in this arena where you're able to sharpen and hone your skills in a way that is like, yes, I'm surviving. Like I'm doing it, you know, and it gives
Hmm.
that power back to you in times where it feels like you're not able to play otherwise. You're not able to like do the game of life the way that you want, but you could do this, and this will help you believe that you can do it again some other day.
Exactly.
So I thought that was always very powerful. You know, another kind of example on that end is that like I've been super attached to the Dynasty Warriors games since I was a kid. Like I would play them with my brother and my sister, but I was the one that like kind of got a little bit more like obsessive with them, like with like the history and just like
Hmm.
the moments and the storytelling are just like really stellar in those titles. And there was this moment where a character he like does his like true Musuo attack, and that's like his like special attack when he's like on his last breath. He's like in red health, and he does it, and he yells, "All my power!" He says, "All my power." And there's just something about that, how it was like dramatized in the game. Like there's these blue lights and there's like a pillar of like shimmering light that kind of like erupts around him. I feel like those kind of moments when they hit people in their childhood years, they build those gut based memories early on, and
Hmm.
people learn to resonate with and crave experiences like that because they bring awe to their lives in a time where maybe they're struggling to find awe otherwise. And they find something awesome, and it's like, wow, I'm never going to forget that as long as I live, because there's just a sort of um a level of evocative energy that it has, and I think that's like that's really powerful in any good game, especially as you're a kid. So
Yeah, video games are they're the modern it's the modern like cinema and the modern
mm,
books, you know, or like literature, if you will, you know, like escapism, and
Yeah.
it really chaps my ass whenever I get on like Facebook or whatever and I see those. Have you seen them ads? It's like, oh, is your child addicted to video games? Lawsuit things. It's like, come on, man, leave the video game industry alone. Like,
Right.
yeah, I've never had issues because of video games. Can video games? Are there games where there's excessive violence? Of course. Have they been responsible for any of the traumatic events in history? Not to my knowledge. So let's leave video games alone. But yeah, they
Mhm.
are a great form of escapism and like conjuring like these emotions in life that you can't maybe deal with on your own, and you would need a way to like kind of feel like you could like get
Yeah.
through this situation. I totally understand that, and I think that's why we love them, and especially Resident Evil,
Mhm.
because you have these characters that are thrust, especially in the original three games, against these seemingly impossible odds,
Mhm.
desperate, very very dire situations that they're put into, that are you know, it's almost as if like they shouldn't be able to exist in this world, and make it, but somehow you find the way.
Yeah.
And I get that. Yeah, it's just so, man, it's so beautiful. I can't even put it into words.
It is. There are that's why, so a few things off of that. One of them is that I like the term escapism in some senses, but I also think it's reductive in some ways. I know it's like a common phrase and it's a useful phrase. I think it's a reductive in a sense that like I wouldn't ever say that video games are merely escapism. I think they are nurturing and nourishing to your mind
Absolutely.
and to your person in a way that no other form of media quite is. It allows you to participate in a way that is more tangible and it's more hands-on, and it allows you to shape your own destiny rather than kind of just
Right.
experience through voyeurism another person's the way that you would through a novel or through a book. You're
Exactly.
able to actually change the course of events based on your competence and your foresight and whatever else you may be feeling. I
Problem
would
solving, all that.
it's
Yes.
problem solving, item management, all of these things. But and then another riff off of what you said was that so there are these moments in the games where you you have a OST that kind of lyrically or poetically sort of communicates or conveys that sense of despair. So the desperation and the sort of I'm so done with this. I should be home by now. I should be safe by now. I don't
Hmm.
want to kill another BOW. I think that's like really beautifully conveyed, especially if you look at Resident Evil 3, the OG, Nemesis blasts your getaway to pieces, your chopper to pieces, and you hear this theme, and it's like it's almost like the song is saying to you, I'm so sick of it. Like the rhythm of it is like it's
Hmm.
almost like duh, 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 duh. It's like, oh, not another thing. I'm so sick of it. That's a kind of like desperation that like it really just oozes to me. And I think so many of the early titles with their soundtracks being so pronounced. And the remakes do this sometimes really well, but in a lot of the remakes, I find that the OSTs are a little subdued. And so
Hmm.
because of that, I kind of prefer the more prominent and more loud, overbearing almost aspect of the original OSTs because they communicate to you how you're probably feeling and how the character is definitely
Yeah.
feeling.
I
And
haven't played
so,
those games with
uh-huh.
the original soundtrack since my first run of 2 remake and 3 remake, and 4 remake for that matter. I haven't played the OSTs since the first runs. I played them and let it be what it was.
Mhm.
And then I'm like, okay, every subsequent playthrough after that, I've always got the OSTs on. So it's more dramatic, it's more evocative of the feelings of the moment. You know, One of the greatest composers of all time is,
Just a second. I'm just gonna turn this fan real quick.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay, no, I'm good.
One of the greatest composers of all time used music in this aspect, and
Mhm.
that was John Towner Williams. Everybody knows John Williams from Star Wars fame, Indiana Jones, Superman. Anytime there was a new character or a character on screen that they had a theme, or if there was like well, I'm going to shut this window real quick because they're going to be mowing grass. So
Okay.
there we go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Anytime that there's like like an element to the story or whatever, that, like, take Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Ark has its own theme. Like these loud, boisterous, emotion, like, grabbing themes are like key. Music is key to any form of media, whether it's video games, movies, you know, uh, film, TV shows. It's very important to it. So that's why I find myself preferring the soundtracks on the older games, like you said. Whenever she has her getaway gets crashed, and it has that sort of like that, oh, want music. It's like, oh
Yeah, it does.
yeah, dude.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, I get it. So yeah, I wanted to ask you,
Uh-huh.
which ones do you prefer? What is your do you prefer like the older style tank controls, the remake over the shoulders? What era is your favorite, and what game is your favorite in this series? What one really
Um,
resonated with you the most out of all the games? Two,
I,
three, four?
it's a good question. For original and remake, both resonate with me very strongly because they are, this is like my bias coming out here, but they are the first and I think like arguably the only time that Resident Evil has implemented folk horror and elements of folk horror well, that subgenre,
Hmm.
that you would see in movies like Midsommar or The Wicker Man,
The Wicker
and
Man,
in
yeah.
evoking cultural alienation, being in a land that you fundamentally can't comprehend how their culture and practices work and why they do what they do. So I think those are really high on my list for those reasons. RE5 is extremely high on my list for many reasons, but I think that it was one of the first times that there was a very targeted attempt to sort of convey the aims of the antagonist through the bioweapon. So, like when someone is rejected by Ouroboros in Resident Evil 5, what do they look like? They look like they are drowning in a puddle of their own helplessness. It's like this is what should happen to humanity for those that are not worthy. These are the chaff. I'm gonna find the wheat kind of
Hmm.
thing. So I think any story in Resident Evil that like very like it poetically kind of conveys what the wishes, the aims of the chief researcher or virologist or antagonist are. I think those are amazing. I think that Revelations 2 does that very well too, because she's trying to find a vessel that is impervious to fear. So she's making a virus, T Phobos, that actually mutates in response to fear. So I think those kind of
I love
thematic pieces.
conveniently.
Mhm.
I'm sorry, I was gonna say, I love conveniently how they have Natalia, who is that vessel, and you know what I mean. And it's just such good. That's such good writing for that game. I
Yeah,
love Revelations too.
it serves that
Absolutely.
specific purpose. Yeah, because
Yes.
because every Resident Evil entry will be in some way trying to find a perfect vessel, a vessel that is ideal for the vision that someone has envisaged for their new bioagent, right? So
Yeah.
whether it be a tyrant or whether it be a G virus malformation, or it be someone who can't feel fear, or I just want my daughter back, like Mother Miranda. I just want a vessel for her to exist in. So all of those aims, that I think my favorite entries are the ones that sort of integrate that with the gameplay and the bioagent the best. So I think Code Veronica is very high on my list as well. It might be my favorite game thematically. I love how it actually it really creatively explores something I've been studying lately, which is known as the Oedipal conflict. And this is like kind of like the very fancy Freudian term for the hostility that is experienced between father and son or father and child. And Alexia and her father, we keep seeing in this story this dragonfly whose wings are torn off and he is fed into the mouth of a queen ant. So, and you see like Nosferatu, like his hands are behind his back, and he's been stripped of his wings, so to speak. He's lost all of his power. He's lost his sense of humanity, and now he is being devoured by someone who is usurping him, and it happens to be his own children, his daughter, and his son, who is like helping to orchestrate this whole thing because he is subservient to the daughter. He is essentially her slave, like her bootlicker is Alfred. So we have this more complex dynamic going on, and we have the recurring imagery and the puzzle solving with that imagery of the dragonfly's wings being stripped off and being fed to a queen ant. That's kind of what you see in a lot of Oedipal stories, kind of in a reverse sense, because initially it's kind of like if you look at Greek mythology, for example, you'll have Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and then you'll have a father figure. You'll have Kronos, and you'll have a Titan, and and Zeus will like do something. He'll use his lightning bolt, and he'll rip himself out of the belly of Kronos when he is eaten. So it's kind of like the whole theme of in Greek mythology of there being an oracle, the oracle at Delphi, in the story Oedipus Rex, who says that, hey, if you have any children, they're going to kill you and they're going to take everything you have. And so there's that deep-seated fear. And you don't need someone to, it's a very dark thing to discuss, but it's like some people feel that. Some fathers feel that. And we don't know if Alexander Ashford felt that. In this case, it was more so, at least as we can tell, it was more so of a case of the children being wicked. So it was the children rebelling against father, and you usually see that come out in some aspect, like for example, again, like Zeus tearing through the belly of Kronos, his like sort of father, in that like pantheon of deities. And here we have like Alexia tearing off the wings of her father and devouring everything that he owns. It's sort of like devouring his ambition, is devouring his vigor, his life force, and taking it for herself because she has deemed herself to be the queen ant, the elite, right? And I think there with implanting the queen ant genes into the T virus and creating something that thematically resembles this power structure of here's the elite and here's the servants, here's the peasants, and here's the queen. There's something that's always struck me as super beautiful and creative and intelligent about that I love it in Code Veronica, and that's like beyond all of its weirdness and campiness and which are great too. But sometimes people they prefer just a more just a less kind of silly or campy portrayal than in Code Veronica. They would prefer something like the later entries or RE1 remake even. But beyond all of that, I just think thematically it might be the strongest entry and it has the best soundtrack. So
it absolutely has the best soundtrack. In a lot of people's opinions, it definitely is up there for me. It tied with Resident Evil 2. We did a show. We literally just recorded a show about Code Veronica a few weeks back with Dwayne Merritt, the musician. And we just couldn't get past all like the camp, cracking and laughing on it, about it, and listening to you expound about like the whole family trauma theme and the power struggle is really an interesting perspective that we really didn't even look at, and that's incredible, like to think of it like that, and because it's very much true in there. What was that word you called it now? What was that?
So the term that sort of it encapsulates a sort of hostility that's felt between like father and son.
Hmm.
is called the Oedipal conflict. However, father
Oedipal.
and son are, yeah, and it's spelled Oedipal. And
Okay.
it comes from the character Oedipus from Oedipus Rex, which is one of the great like stage plays of Sophocles.
Hmm.
We actually took some inspiration from that as well for our story. I won't say how, but you
Okay.
might see Oedipal themes there. Hostility between, and when I say father and son, those are genderless. It could be a daughter, it could be a mom. Those are like any instance of a parent and a child, and there being a hostility there being a competition for one's legacy or wealth or power, ambition,
Hmm.
that comes into play, and that's very big in stories like Star Wars, The Lion King.
It was
I
very
Killed
prominent in
Mufasa.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade
Yeah.
with the conflict between Henry Jones Sr. and his son Indy.
Yes. Hmm.
Absolutely.
There
Wow.
too.
See, you're learning me, man. I didn't even know this.
Yeah,
That's
this
something I
is
didn't know.
something
That's
that
wild.
like, because here's what I've done over like my whole like Resident Evil like analysis obsession thing over like the past like what like 5 6 years, is I've realized like all of these patterns that I'm drawing, they're only on like the first level. There's all these strata, there's all these layers, right? And I was
Hmm.
trying to draw patterns between like, oh, Wesker and Jake, but then there's like Alfred and Alexia and Alexander Ashford. There's like fathers and sons, but like what are the relationships between them? Are these like an archetype like of story? Of is there like a type of story that tells of a situation of maybe competitiveness or hostility between parent and child? And it's like, yes, there is. So there's always some deeper layer, something that is more universally applicable than what I would initially like draw as a pattern, because I was completely new to that as well, just until like pretty recently. And when I found it, and it's in books like if you read The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, he'll allude to it. If you read Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson, he'll have archetypes that kind of delineate like what is the father, what does the great father and the terrible father represent in a story? What does the archetypal son represent in a story? And it's like all of those patterns will repeat, but they can have positive or negative valences. So, for example, Alexia had a very negative valence, trying to enslave and experiment on her own father and cast him aside, because and in Alfred's diary, it's very vicious too. He's like, "Oh, what a good for nothing waste of a father he is. He wasn't a good test subject." And now Alexia herself has to lock herself away in this cryogenic chamber for what 15 years, and it's like these ingrates, right?
Hmm.
These very maligned negative valence sort of son figures, son and daughter figures. That's what's going on here with them and their father, and all of the imagery with the dragonfly and the queen ant
Yeah.
is meant to sort of it's meant to convey that on a less literal level and a more poetic level.
And I
So
think they kind of like went a little bit deeper into like the
mhm.
vitriolic feelings that Alexander Ashford had towards especially Alexia in the and the was which one, Umbrella Chronicles or where they kind of
Dark
redid it.
side.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, the Dark Side. Okay, and where he was like he wants to, you know, he's like, oh, you gotta kill her because she's, you know, crazy, or he clearly had like vitriol towards his children. So it was more evidently prominent in that version, in that
Mhm.
story, where they did, you know, it was kind of, you know, you had to read between the lines when you were playing the actual Code Veronica game. So,
Mhm.
you know, I really could, I can't help but think how well they could make Code Veronica if they remake it, you know, and
Oh
I
yeah.
really have a lot of high hopes for that. It is
Mhm.
definitely one of my favorites in the series. I've said this in the podcast we did about it, that it doesn't get its flowers from the entire community, but for those that do, man, it is a
I
cult
love it.
classic for them. They love
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I love that game. It's probably
Mhm.
it's in my, I forget where I placed it on my tier list. I think I've said it is in my top 5, if not my top 10 favorites in the series, and it needs to be talked about with the other three. because it technically was supposed to be Resident Evil 3. And the only reason why it wasn't was because of an exclusive deal that Capcom, as you know, had with Sony for numbered entries. So to me, Code Veronica is the true Resident Evil 3, whereas Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is the spin-off title. And
Interesting.
yeah, I do love that game. I do love
Mhm.
that game a lot. It's really, it can be tough. That fight with the tyrant inside of the cargo, the hold of
Mhm.
the plane.
You have to be ready. Yeah.
Yeah, forget that shit. That's tough. Um, well, let me see here. Um, so you really, that one really resonates with you, like the folk
Mhm.
horror aspect of Resident Evil 4.
Yes.
I kind of share that sentiment very deeply now, but at first I was very apprehensive to that game whenever it first came out and did not want to
Mhm.
give it a chance,
Uh-huh.
and because of the change up. But I eventually did, and I'm the world. You know, I'm better for it because it's absolutely one of my most favorite games. As a matter of fact, I have Leon's become my favorite character. Him and Hunk. I
Oh,
have my
okay.
both my Leons here. Um, how I will have to say this about Leon. I
Mhm.
will admit this because when they first brought out Resident Evil 2, excuse me, and I saw the changes that we weren't going to have Chris and Jill and Barry and all them, that we had moved on to new characters. I was thinking to myself, who in the hell is this guy? This nerdy looking cop with this beach bum haircut. I
Yeah.
was not impressed with Leon at first, and I didn't think of him he didn't really like strike me as like a memorable character. And I admit
Mhm.
that. But now, after playing Resident Evil 4 and then revisiting the game over and over again, Leon's become my guy, and any game with Leon, I'm there for it. And I'm really excited to see what they do with 9 if the rumors are true that Leon will be in it.
Uh-huh.
I'm hopeful of that, but at the same time, well, they've given us Chris in every game since Resident Evil 5. So, anybody that says that, oh, Leon's in every game, no, well, that's not true. Chris has had more screen time. And I think they were trying to make Chris like they were trying to get back to Chris being the face of Resident Evil. But in
Uh-huh.
my opinion, I don't think he can after Leon Kennedy.
Really?
He's
Okay.
no, I don't think so, man. I just
Mhm.
because Leon Kennedy is Resident Evil for me. I love Chris. I love all the characters, I do, but like if we have to pick a favorite, Leon's definitely probably my favorite. Right,
Oh,
but
wow.
well, him or Hunk. I love
Mhm.
Hunk, but he's really a kind of a side character. Any character that you have that resonates with you the most that you really kind of attach to?
Um, I think the two that I usually gravitate towards for this kind of question are Alex Wesker and Albert Wesker, and then I like the Redfields a lot. Like I like Chris and Claire usually as protagonists over Leon and Jill, but it's not so much about the actual nuances of the characters per se. It's kind of like the entries that they're in.
Yeah,
They have some additional book or some additional backstory. For example, Resident Evil 1 with Chris, we have Biohazard at the beginning, we have the true story behind Biohazard, all of that like supplemental material, and we have a little bit of drama going on with him, between him and the deputy officer as well as Chief Irons. So I kind of like the drama that plays out there with Chris and Jill against like Chief Irons, and how it's handled in that book, and then how it's handled in Resident Evil, SD Perry's first Resident Evil novel. And
is
so
that the
like
one
kind
that
of
you read on the?
yeah.
That wasn't You haven't read Caliban Cove yet.
I've read all of them except for Zero Hour
Oh, Zero Hour. Okay,
by now.
I'm sorry. I'm
So
sorry to interrupt you there.
oh, no problem. But yeah, I've read almost all of them like on the channel. But the yeah, so it's and then for example with Chris's arc, I got
You do
really
that very
invested.
well, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
the that first one I was actually I almost wish I could do it again, because like I wasn't so much trying to imitate the characters or doing something like with acting. It was more so just reading, as it was. But I got more into that in the later ones. But yeah, with Chris, I like the sort of breadth of stories that he has, because you got him in one with all of that political conspiratorial stuff going on with the city, and then he moves on to this sort of like intermediary iteration of Chris in Code Veronica, when he sets out to go to Rockford and see what's up with Claire and meets with Wesker, and then the rivalry starts to like stir up a little. And then in 5, it's more so like the bioterror era of Resident Evil, and there we have more of like an action movie aspect. There are a lot of like the writing choices that you see there, like, oh, from this point on, the BSAA won't go with us. It just has to be me and you, Chris and Sheva. So there's a lot of those kind of choices that I think do a good job of really ramping up the intensity of what Chris has to deal with from like 1 to CV to 5, and then come even like 6, 7 in Village. Like with Village, he is like, I really love his sort of fit in Village. I love his look and his design, and I love the potential for the story for if it were to continue, which is like a little bit of what we were inspired by and wanted to kind of pursue for Resurrection. But like the idea that Chris, because of the BSAA's actual cover up of their incompetence of the Dolby incident, where they were unable to keep the E-Type and Evelyn from wreaking havoc within that village in Louisiana. Because of that, Chris is actually disbanded, and he's taken control of the Hound Wolf Squad elite group for himself and broken off from the BSAA. He's like, these guys can't be trusted. And then
So he's gone rogue.
Huh?
He's gone rogue essentially from
He's gone rogue. He's gone rogue. And then in Village, you see that there is further evidence to suggest that there is a full-on corruption that is sort of befalling the BSAA organization as we know it. All of the values that they stood for are coming crumbling down because they have deployed these bioweapons to take care of their work instead of actual men, instead of actual people. So all of those are really, really cool sort of developments. One thing I always liked about Chris as well, and probably why he's like my either like second or third character after the Weskers, is because he is always uncompromisingly standing up against a corrupt authority, a corrupt superior. So in the late game, it's the BSAA turning corrupt. In the early game, it's against the town and Chief Irons and against Wesker. All of those political pawns that Umbrella is basically paying off and paying to turn a blind eye, promising to, so that it's keeping Chris and the other stars like trapped under these levels of authority, of oppressive authority. Chris is always willing to stand up to that, and I thought that was always really cool. He's like kind of like if you've heard of the Enneagram and personality types, he's the challenger. He's always the one that needs to be against, to be a leader, to basically say like, hey, so Chief Irons is like, no one's going to inspect the Spencer estate until we have my approval. And Chris is like, no, what if I want to right now? What if I want to just do what I want to do because I believe that there is action that needs to be taken? That is like the core of Chris's characterization, not only in that early Biohazard, the beginning book, but it's also what you see in 5. It's also what you see in 8. At the end there, when he's
even though they were trying to sell us on the fact that Chris is a bad guy, I don't really think any of us were buying it. But it was however,
however, think about this aspect to it. Even early on, against Chief Irons, against the rest of the BSAA in 5, when he's like, I'm going to keep going with this mission, even if you guys are not going to support me. Think about all of those instances where he stands up to an authority figure. And he's like, no, I'm not going to listen to what you say. He's always had an element of rebelliousness if it were required to enact serious change. And he has a strong sense of justice, and he's not willing to be he's not willing to
go with the flow
to anyone who he believes to be basically preventing progress with this counterterrorism or keeping the citizens safe in the earlier pre-bioterror kind of arcs of Resident Evil. So then come Village, if you look at his real true motives in Village, and this is something that I spoke about a few times, was that so throughout like his communication with the Hound Wolf Squad, they were saying like, oh, you should have told Ethan about this situation. You should have told him about Mia. You should have told him about this, right?
Hmm.
My reasoning to why he didn't and why he initially may look ambiguously kind of antagonistic.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine that he does. I think that sort of the rebelliousness of like, I'm done with this stupid organization and what they claim to believe. I'm going to take matters into my own
And he's going to
hands.
do what he thinks best. You know,
Right.
listening to you tell me about how Chris's kind of like psychology
Yeah.
really makes me have a bigger appreciation for the character. And I'm starting to think maybe I might put him higher on my tier of people that I love in the franchise as far as
Hmm.
characters, man. I've always loved Leon because like he's like a superhero. He can get it
Uh-huh.
done. You know things are going to be okay. Like in this song, Bullet or the Blade, everything's going to be all right, like keep your eyes on the road ahead. Chris really is that guy that you're claiming he is, and
Mhm.
I think I'm liking him a lot more than I used to.
He
Not that I hated him, but he
do
wasn't.
you see the writing situations that the writers put him in? It's always making him. It's as if they're begging him. It's as if the writers are begging him to stand up against the current order because it sucks and no one
Yeah,
else will. And
yeah,
it sucks in some way, and you're gonna have to expose how it sucks. And so like back to that thing in Village when everyone's like, oh, you should have told Ethan about this. The reason why I think he never told them is because he actually he convinced Ethan and family to move out to Romania to lure out Mother Miranda because he
oh
understood the threat was
wow,
coming.
no
So
way.
so you understand with that context, and you understand that. So they moved there, and then the Mia, which is actually Mother Miranda but shapeshifted, is actually like she's reading these folk tales, she's getting into all this stuff, and she has this like baby, like Rosemary's Baby is kind of like a callback with Rose. And then you have Chris, and he shows up in the scene, and he knows more than anyone knows, and he appears antagonistic, and it's very ambiguous. Like, why are you just shooting Mia? And then when you understand, it's like, well, if Ethan found out, and if you told him verbatim, how would Ethan have reacted to you using your own child to lure out this supervillain character, this Mother
Oh
Miranda?
man.
So it's like, Ethan would have been less cooperative. You could make that argument. He would have been maybe violent, because it's like, what the hell, Chris? And it's like, oh, you told me to move out here because you're wanting to use my baby to expose the threat so that you can kill the threat. Like, Ethan basically would have had less of a working relationship than he already
Yes.
had with Chris, if that were the case.
Oh man, see,
So,
this game makes so much more sense to me now. We literally just recorded our Village podcast
uh-huh.
Thursday, and I was I'm not shitting on the game, but I was like, man, it doesn't make sense to me why Chris would move them right under the nose of Mother Miranda. And to have you break it down like that, he was doing it to lure them out makes
Yeah.
total sense. And now I have a bigger appreciation for that lore because
Also,
I
if
don't
you
think about these things.
it's hard to because it's the series keeps evolving, but with Chris, I think one thing that has always remained quite consistent is that again, that's an awfully difficult decision to make, to show up on the spot and blast someone's loved one to nothing, to oblivion,
Yeah.
and then have to continue to cooperate with you with having no information. It's like no one wants to do that, but he understands that, hey, if we can make these sacrifices now, and if Ethan can get through this shock and this confusion, then hey, in the end we will have saved thousands of lives. We won't have a returning Ava from Mother Miranda. Mother Miranda's sort of essentially her terrorism of the villages will be stopped, and we can prevent her destruction from seeping outside of the village that village takes place in when it's burning. So,
Hmm. Wow. I mean, I never looked at it from that lens. And
mm,
man, that's why I just love to be able to have this moment to talk to you because I knew that somebody that maybe can have more of an intellect at looking at the lore of this stuff, like to talk with them about it, maybe look at things that a perspective where I don't see it because we all see things from our own perspective. And wow, that literally blew my mind when you said that. Like, oh, he used them as bait, and I never even equated that. Like, Chris is not a dumbass. I mean, he knows what he's doing clearly.
Mhm.
Is the aspect I'm going for. My buddy said that. My co-host, he said that. He was like, "Well, Chris isn't a dumbass. He knows what he's doing." I think that's what he was trying to tell me,
Uh-huh.
but he didn't say it so eloquently.
Mhm.
But wow,
And
that's
it's
interesting.
also it's also a thing of with storytelling. Yes, maybe, right? Chris could have said something like, "That's not Mia." He could have said something like that, like, "This isn't Mia. We need to
Yeah,
go
that's
now."
true.
Maybe, right? But from a storytelling perspective, a writer, they are going to withhold details because it's like ammunition for a writer. It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you don't know this yet. Wait till you learn it. It'll make a lot more sense and it'll hit a lot harder when you do learn it. So that's kind of like what I was trying to rationalize in terms of his decision making in those early events when you recontextualize them with the later ones and with what Chris has always done in this series. He's always
Mhm.
against someone that he just gets sick of. He's like, I've had enough of
Yeah.
your BS, but
Which
like he does that with everyone.
we've seen him become like this hard, like kind of jaded towards like that kind of stuff, like authority
Yeah,
and stuff. Um, Whereas like in the original Resident Evil 1, particularly mostly because of the voice acting though, he was like
mhm,
more on the friendly side, but it's like I said, I wouldn't necessarily call him a dick, you know what I mean? But he is a jaded cop, that
yeah,
has seen a lot of shit that has really just like it's molded who he is, if you will.
yeah.
And yeah, I never really looked at Chris in that lens. So, thank you for that actually.
No problem. It's when you look at someone that is sick and tired of decade after decade putting up with just garbage and phony talk and cheap promises from this organization that promised to always stand by their values. And when you see them abandon it by deploying bioweapons with the BSAA, when you see them abandon it by covering up their incompetence to contain the Dulvey incident, you start to understand where Chris's jadedness comes from. And
Hmm.
the term that I like the best for Chris at that point, like village and like post village, is like disillusionment. He's become
Mm.
disillusioned with the
Hmm.
BSA. He's lost faith in their ability to do any good. He's like, no, all of you had your chance at playing this game. Now just leave it to me, you
I
know?
th- I
And
think we have a little bit of a teaser, a little taste of what our Chris's personality is going to be in this resurrection, and I'm
yes,
starting to
in
like it.
Resurrection,
It's
yes, we
shaping
got
up.
really deep into this.
Nice.
I always find it fascinating when the lines between good and evil are ambiguous and they're blurred, and I very firmly believe that characters are what they do. They are what they do. They aren't what
Hmm.
people say they are. They aren't what they say they are. Because just like in real life, if I were to say like, "Oh, I'm this type of person. I'm not like the other girls." If I were going to be like that,
Yeah.
it doesn't really mean anything. It's what they do.
You
That
know,
so
it's,
what? Hmm.
oh, a story that really handled that really well, that
Uh-huh.
like a lot of people shit on it. The Last of Us, especially the second, The
I
Last
need
of Us
to
Part Two.
I need to get into that because I'm not
Oh,
familiar. But
yeah, if you ever
JJ's
have
playing
the,
it right now.
yeah, if you, what's that?
JJ and Corey are playing it right now. Like they've been playing it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember I think they took a vote for like the community to get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you ever have the chance to sit down and play The Last of Us and a sequel too, that story, it's the lines between who's good and who's bad aren't so, they're not as ambiguous. It's not as
Mhm.
it's interesting. I don't want to spoil nothing, so you have to see it for yourself. But yeah,
Okay.
it's wildly good, like on the lines of what you're talking about, as far as that goes.
Mhm. But yeah,
Um,
that's definitely an angle that we are for sure exploring in Resurrection of Biohazard Story, being inspired by those later events and kind of pitting Chris into a scenario where it's, hey, you have to face where you came from. Where you came from is this organization, the BSAA, that you broke off from.
Mhm.
You became your rogue unit, but you came from somewhere. If you were to face them again, and if you clashed over prey, what would happen, and how would you handle that? And how is the world around you and the new bioagent? How is all of that going to be devised to test you? And that's what I love so much about this series is that it's very character centric writing. It's about Chris and Jill. It's about bringing elements out of them that not that they want to go through, but that they absolutely need to. That they need to find clarity and unity. A lot of these heroes. In these stories and many other franchises, they start in a state of disunity. There is something not adding up. They're like a few different people in one body. And once all of that is united, they have this clarity, they have this focus, and they're not so dysregulated and so stubborn and disillusioned and angry. So that's what we're getting into. And there's a really cool side of the arc for Jill that plays into this as well. So
Now, I said on my last show, we were speculating about resurrection. Now, you don't have to
uh-huh.
confirm, you do
Sure.
not have to confirm anything I'm about to say. This is
Hmm.
my speculation. I know nothing about the script really. Next to that, I only know who the players are as far as
Uh-huh.
like actors.
Yeah.
I have a sense of like from listening to you talk about maybe the direction, kind of like the development of characters, how that's going to go. But and like I said, you don't have to confirm or deny any of
Uh-huh.
this. This is my speculation
Sure.
because of Wesker's death in Resident Evil 5,
Uh-huh.
and clearly he's in this.
Yeah.
That's where you got the name Resurrection from, that somehow he's resurrected, which is something that we wanted to see in video games. Now, I don't know this, but
Uh-huh.
I'm just basing this off of a
It,
feeling. You don't have to
it's
confirm nothing, but you
I
know.
will say that the term resurrection it applies at many many different levels.
Oh,
So
okay.
I think the Wesker one is the most prominent one, like the most kind of conceivable one from the marketing that we've done so far. It's like Wesker's resurrection, right? But there's a
Hmm.
lot going on here. There may be spiritual rebirths. There may be literal rebirths and resurrections of people. There may be zombie-like bioagents that have more going on with them than
Yeah.
it appears. It definitely applies a lot to the town, Rosa Inferma, that it exists in, as well as to the characters. So
Hmm.
it's a many-layered title that very much matches the story. Yeah.
That's, and every good writer does that, so like it's like a rose, you know, layer after layer, I can't wait for it. Um, with that being said about the whole Wesker thing, I, I think it was a very, in hindsight, looking back on it, killing off Wesker. I understand they were wanting to try to close out that story arc. For what reason, I don't know. You have a franchise on your hands. Keep it going. Um, I think that a very good contender for a replacement for Wesker could have
Uh-huh.
very much been Lansdale, and
Morgan
they
Lansdale. Yeah.
Morgan Lansdale, and they didn't really roll with that, and I was really disappointed with that whole, like, you could have. Revelations is a fucking fantastic game. You know what I mean? I love it, and Lansdale really struck me as like this guy could be like the next big thing, and they didn't go nowhere with it. You know what I mean? I just don't
I felt
understand.
both of the Revelations games, right? Like I felt that way about Alex Wesker and Morgan Lansdale, and I was like, wow, both of these are like really strong, like antagonistic characters. Like we need something like that
Weren't they
after.
though?
Yeah,
I,
Derek Simmons in Six, like for example, like he has this obsession around like Ada, and he has these different like chrysalid viruses and stuff going on. But I think there is something about Alex Wesker and something about Morgan Lansdale that is like especially seething and cutting and vicious. And I've been saying for years, like I would love to see Alex Wesker make an official appearance in either a new side game or even better, a mainline entry. I thought she was going to be, I thought she was Lady D in Village early on, based on Natalia's facial structure and how she had transferred bodies into Natalia. Natalia older,
Hmm.
may have gone to Romania and started to um, essentially meet Mother Miranda and
Oh
orchestrate this
yeah,
whole
that's
thing.
interesting
Yeah,
because we really haven't gotten closure with Natalia, especially if you get
yeah.
the bad ending with Barry, where if you don't have uh I bel
Moira, shoot.
yeah, Moira shoot
Yeah,
what's his name for Claire, you get the bad ending
yeah.
with Natalia. We
Fisher.
don't.
Yeah,
Yeah, Fisher, I think it is.
Neil Fisher.
They don't really, they haven't closed that arc, and I hope we get a Revelations 3 to close that
Yeah,
at the very least, or to at least kind of like take us in a direction of where did it go, especially if this bad situation. Well, she was always going to morph into basically Alex Wesker, wasn't she? You know,
because
so
the mind transferal.
yeah,
Alex Wesker found her perfect vessel in someone who couldn't feel fear, and then
yeah,
she decided to mind transfer, and um, yeah, that was just another phenomenal entry. It's just yeah, it's see there are these kind of threads that where a villain will rise for the sake of their entry and then kind of be out of the picture.
yeah.
But like I like some cases like like Glenn Arias from Vendetta and
I
his
love you know what I'm sorry, I don't
Azul.
mean I love him. I
Uh-huh.
love him. Somebody asked me once who's the most tragic or who's your favorite villain in the series
Uh-huh.
outside of the games or outside of the Wesker per
Okay.
or Nemesis, and I said Glenn Arias because of
Mm,
what happened to him being having his wife killed, at their wedding by the United States government.
right.
I don't think he gets enough recognition, but I'm sorry, but anyway, continue on.
But yeah, it's no, I feel the same way. I love the setup there. You feel for him. It's sick and twisted that he wants to like recreate everything. He wants to basically capture Rebecca and use her as his replacement wife and continue on the ceremony. But I thought it
Hmm.
was fascinating that we have at least a story long enough to span two CG films because we have returning like his in-laws became like some of the bioweapons that fight in Death Island.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
like there it's like at least we have planning we have like entries planned for villains to have an impact or a ripple effect beyond just the entry it exists in, right? And I think that's why Wesker was so impactful is because his arc spanned so many entries before he died, and it was like really you could have ended the entire series at 5 given the way it was written.
Yeah.
It was almost like you have your the ultimate most megalomaniacal, sadistic, destructive man who wants to cleanse the slate of humanity with who he believes to be the elite will be chosen by Ouroboros. You have someone like that coming out of Spencer's eugenics circle of folks, and you have him being the main antagonist, and you have him dying. It's like it sounds like the final entry to me for Resident
Yeah.
Evil. So yeah,
They
it is
had
it
a
is hard to find another.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they had a very good opportunity there with Death Island to kind of act.
Mhm.
I look at all these in the lens of like, how could we bring Wesker back? Because there, it seems like the series has always been chasing Wesker since 2009,
Yeah,
and
I'd agree.
that would have been a good opportunity for Death Island to bring him back, even if it wasn't in a video game. Um, the antagonist of that film, I can't remember his name, the guy that
Dylan
had the
Blake.
Dylan, yeah, Dylan.
Yeah.
Um, I even though I do like his story,
Mhm.
it kind of doesn't make sense to why he would want to like go against the heroes. He ultimately, I would be blaming Umbrella, and these guys are fighting Umbrella, so why wouldn't you team up? But hey, it's a movie. It is what it is. I like
Mhm.
it, but he didn't resonate with me like Glenn Arias did. And it's so funny because I have all the CG movies, but that one, as a matter of fact, I think I'm about to go purchase it on iTunes as soon as we get off here because I loved Vendetta. It's
Yeah, me
one of
too.
my favorites. It's one of my favorites. But
Same.
yeah, I just think that that was a perfect opportunity to like kind of bring back Wesker, or if they're trying to do it. I don't know what the plan is for the future with the remakes. If they're going to retcon, maybe like if they let's say they remake 5 and they don't kill him off, if they retcon that whole situation,
Mm.
so I don't know how they could do that or would do that. I know I've heard JJ and Anthony from LTRE talk
Yeah.
about this at
Uh-huh.
nauseum, and you as well. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just all we can do is speculate. How would we do this? Are they going to do it? Uh, who knows what we're going to get with 9 or where the future of the series goes, or if they're going to base future entries off of the continuity that we have with 2 remake, 3 remake, and Village and 7. So who knows? But I'm here for it and I can't wait, you know. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think we're going to see, you know?
Um, it's really difficult because this is actually a lot of where our research went to of
Really?
how can it biologically be feasible for someone to survive a really a really graphic death scene
A lava
with a
bath?
sense of finality to it, you know, like
Yeah.
what, yeah, like what could be going on that actually enables them to continue living, you know. And one of the things that I thought about early on, because I don't want to talk about what we're doing, you'll find out in terms
Yes.
of like the play, like how that's executed and why it's possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And also why it all culminates in a town, because in a town in Mexico, because it's like if he died in Africa, what happened? Like, how did he get to this town in Mexico, and what's there for him? What's of interest for him in this town? So, well, that's like all like we'll save. But one thing that I called to attention when we were actually chatting with Project Wesker about this, and it's like when you play Resident Evil 5 and you look at all of the Ouroboros bioweapons and bosses. If you look at Ouroboros Aheri, if you look at Excelligione, these are all unfavorable adaptations. They were rejected by Ouroboros. Now, even being rejected by Ouroboros and not adapting in the favorable manner, they were still able to withstand an extraordinary amount of abuse. They were able to take on some of them. You can't even kill them with a rocket launcher. And now Wesker. Think about Wesker. He's the only favorable adaptation to Ouroboros in the entire game. There is
Hmm.
no one else favorably adapted, and even the unfavorable ones were able to take on satellite lasers, multiple of them. They were able to withstand all of that, right? If Excel is able to withstand all of that being an unfavorable adaptation, and Wesker's is favorable, and he has the prototype virus powers, so he has the enhanced speed and strength from before, on top of Ouroboros regeneration.
Regeneration. Yeah.
It's totally possible. That being said, we don't simply want to rely on Ouroboros. We can't reference anything verbatim anyway because of
Right.
IP. But in terms of if we're going to entertain a scenario where he could have survived and something could have preserved his vitals and made him livable, then we want to introduce something new. So we want to introduce something
Mm.
that would conceivably have allowed him to preserve his working functions and then continue from there, maybe with something else going on as well that kind of dictates his new goals of what's going on. So
Oh man, I'm so excited. See, listening to you talk about this has got me so excited for it. Um, I don't want to keep you too much longer. We've been going on
okay.
for an hour and a half, and
Uh-huh.
like I said, I try to keep it within about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Uh, I don't know that I don't want to have, you know, I don't think that there's too much more you can tell me about Resurrection other than it sounds like it's going to be something that the fans have always wanted. We're excited for it. I can't wait. We're hoping that the Indiegogo campaign is so far from what I last heard, it's around 20,000,
Yeah,
and
around there.
that's reached the goal. It's reached and beat the goal of uh the Keeper's Diary in the amount of time that it's been out compared to that one, which is really impressive. I'm
Yeah,
gonna, yeah, I'm sorry.
it's it's gotten so it's gotten more than half of the funding of the Keeper's Diary in 8 days.
Yeah,
Like in 8 days, where Keeper's Diary took the entire month, and it's a campaign that's running twice as long. So this one's running for 60 as opposed to 30, and we got that. And honestly, this is how difficult it is. This is a really difficult campaign to successfully fund. Like we're
yeah,
essentially asking for that somewhere around that amount on average each week.
yeah,
And obviously, it doesn't always come in linearly. A lot of times, there's a big rush at the beginning, there's
yeah,
momentum in the middle, and then there's like a big rush at the end. That's usually
yeah,
like how campaigns go.
yeah.
But it is something that if we can deliver on this, and it's like if we aren't able to, we know we may not have another chance to round up everyone in this capacity and do a project of this large ambitious scope ever again. So we really want to try to hit it and deliver on this thing. We have a huge obligation for everything that we have planned to deliver if we hit the goal. So
Right. I was in Andy of Biohazard Declassified's chat the other day, asking him about the perks because I was interested in. Excuse me. I was interested in the Blu-ray, so I'm going to be donating the 60. I think he said it
oh,
was.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I won't be able to do that till I would say next Friday, but
Oh, no
for
problem.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll still be up then, right? Of
Yeah,
course it
it'll
will.
still
Yeah.
be up until July 1st.
All
So
right.
you have
So
another 50, we have another like 52 days or so. Yeah.
well, you have my pledge of $60 as soon as
Oh, thank you so
as soon
much.
as yeah, I just gotta with Mother's Day being here, I wasn't able to do it, so I wanted to wait. And then
Oh,
after that, now that Mother's Day's here and going to be gone, and I can worry about that. Had to get mom
mhm.
something for Mother's Day, and
Oh, definitely.
it basically was my campaign contribution. So but you
Thank you
have my
so much,
pledge,
though.
$60.
Yeah.
When in the coming weeks, I'd love to get that Blu-ray. That would be great, and we really wish you guys the best with Resurrection, with the campaign, and anything you want to plug before we go. Any projects other than Resurrection or anything?
Not in particular. If you want to keep up with the details on Resurrection, you can find us on Insta, Facebook, Twitter, basically anywhere, Residents of Evil, or if you type in Resurrection, a Biohazard story, that has its own account.
Hmm.
And then Andy, Biohazard Declassified, usually shares stuff. But yeah, mostly that. And we're super thankful for everyone that's gotten us to this point.
Absolutely.
And we absolutely appreciate everything that you would contribute to make our vision real. And if you have any questions for me beyond our talk today or anything like that, we actually do have a perk on the page that is like, hey, if you want to ask me specific questions, then you can book like a 45-minute session, or if you want to talk to the entire production team, there's one for that as well.
Hmm.
So there's pretty much something for everyone. Yeah.
Nice. All right. I will excuse me. I will put the link to the Indiegogo in the description for Spotify and YouTube. If you could send me that link over via
Sure.
email, and then I can copy paste it. And
Thank you.
yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. Good luck to you guys at the Residents of Evil. Do me a favor and tell JJ I said hey, because
Okay.
man, he's such a cool dude. I love him. Yeah, tell him Kenjira said hi.
Okay.
And yeah, good luck with that campaign. Thanks for coming on, Beggy. It was really nice talking to you. And don't go anywhere. I'll say our goodbyes off stream. So
Okay. Sounds
uh,
good.
yeah, we'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Biohazard Bros podcast, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you.
Biohazard Brothers Podcast.